Hello, Jimmy McKenna here. Going to talk a little bit about the oscillator, and we're going to talk about setting it up, some common troubleshooting things that we look at with this, and hooking it up to the child, and then looking at some other stuff. So let's go through it first. I want to kind of break it down. I think the number one way to learn about the oscillator is to kind of take it apart and look at different pieces of it. So let's just start with the top. The thing is with this machine, it's got a plug in the back, of course, AC power, and then air and oxygen plugs in, and then that's about it. And air and oxygen, of course, is going to run through the side over here, through the blender, and then that's going to deliver the percentage that we would like to our baby. We also like to analyze the oxygen over here on the side coming out of heater that goes to the circuit. Right here we'll have an analyzer in line just to verify that this is the appropriate FiO2 that we're delivering here is actually getting to the child. We've been within 5% almost every time when we set this thing up. So this is the Sensormedics. This is 3100A. There's also a 3100B. It's an adult version. It doesn't have as many, it's very, very similar to setting it up, but it doesn't have as many kind of limits that the neonatal version does, which you can understand why. So the top part, mainly the control area. Moving down, we have our circuit. Of course, this is all disposable, and of course the blue line is the limit. It's going to go to the blue adapter here, the white to white, red to red, green to green. Easy enough there. What does this control? This is actually an air line, and it controls this balloon. Now, I'll turn this thing on shortly here, and I'll kind of show you. If you can zoom up a little bit, man. I'll show you what this does when we adjust the monitor. So there's our balloon. If I turn this up, you'll see the balloon inflate more, add more pressure, or we can take it down. Up and down. So this knob, of course, controls the blue line, and then what it does, it controls how much pressure this balloon puts on this diaphragm right here. So of course, when you turn it up, it's going to add more pressure, therefore it's going to hold more pressure in the circuit. Every one of these balloons works the same way. The green is your control. We'll talk about it a little bit. Blue is the limit. And then this is the dump, kind of the top end pressure, and that's controlled by this balloon. The number one thing you're going to find is that your balloon's not going to hold air. In other words, your circuit's not going to be able to hold any pressure. So, common areas. This may have come off, as you can see here. Loosely put on. If you leak air around that, your balloon's not going to inflate, therefore your circuit won't hold pressure. And we'll talk a lot about pressurizing the circuit. Also, these are multi-piece, so if this comes apart and is not clicked in there appropriately, that will leak. You can see how that's kind of loose. That will leak. That's another problem. And then these balloons, these are plastic, and they can rupture, especially if you haven't used it for a while. So if you have a ruptured balloon, it won't be able to hold pressure. So let me fire this thing up, and I'll have to shut up a little bit. All right. Put my pressure on there. Put my balloons back on because and seal up the circuit. That's what it likes. Okay, so that's a little bit of rundown of that part. Of course, those balloons can rupture at any time. We have more of those balloons in the office if you need to get a hold of those. So, number one thing, if it does not hold pressure, you have to check. Just like any other ventilator circuit, you got to check from the beginning to the end. You notice right now we're oscillating and we have the cork on the end. We're able to hold pressure in here. You can see that right here. The pressurize, you pressurize, but this right here, we have a little piece of little sticker that says this, but it says reset power failure. That is where you're going to pressurize from. If you lose pressure, oscillation stops. Try to gain pressure, it's not working because this is off. If I seal the circuit up, hold it. Pressure is gained, and then we can start the oscillation. If I lose anywhere, let's say I pull this one off here. There we go, we lost pressure. It won't oscillate, nothing works. I can hold it, it won't work until I You got to have everything sealed up. That's the biggest part of setting this thing up. You'll find a leak somewhere. Now let's trace everything to the patient. So out of the back here comes the air. Of course, the flow comes out of here. It's going to come from actually this flow meter right here. We'll talk about this body flow in a second. Go down through here, through the heater, and it goes out to the patient through here. It goes right up in the bottom of the circuit, and now it's oscillated by this diaphragm and a piston here out to the child. So that's how the flow comes in, and then leaks usually will come from this. Let's say you don't have your heater probe over here is out. Let's say you pull your probe out. It's going to be the same old deal. Lost too much pressure. Oh, I'll fix it. Come back over, repressurize, and now it's working. So it has to be fully pressurized to work. That's really the key. Now let's shut this thing off, and I'm going to show you what it looks like from the inside here. This is all disposable. The circuit looks like this. Of course, there's a diaphragm on here. So the air we deliver, the heated air, never actually comes in contact with the machine. The piston for the machine is right here. It looks like a subwoofer. See how it kind of moves a little bit? That's going to cause the oscillation. We can change the frequency, how fast it oscillates, and the amplitude, how far the excursion of the piston is. And that's going to change the oscillation on this diaphragm right here. So the air is fully encapsulated in there. You'll see that there's flow going through the system, and it blows this up each time I let go. So this comes off every single time. This is our water drain. So you're going to have a lot of excess moisture. We want that to drain down. It's going to go into this drain. There's a stopcock on the bottom which you can use to empty. If you leave this open, you're going to have a leak inside of it, which can allow you not to pressurize your system appropriately. So it's very easy how this goes on. Make sure your drain's at the bottom. Just kind of seals up against there, and then these lock it into place. And that's how it seals. Remember that this air does not come in contact with anything on the inside. This is just like a large piston. So let's hook this part up. I'll start it back up again. Blue. Red to red. They try to make this as dummy proof as possible because we are respiratory therapists. Alright. Put this thing back in. Turn it on. Power at the bottom here. Alright, let's try to pressurize the circuit. And what do you know, it worked. So, we got pressure on a circuit. You can see that right here. That's what we're looking for. So let's set this up on a kit. So there's only two things you need to know when you're going to set this up. First thing that I would do, take this thing down to the NICU, hook it up, put the cork in the end of it as you can see, plug everything in, and try to pressurize it. If it pressurizes, you're golden. It's going to be super downhill from now. That's the biggest part of it. So you got pressure on circuit. That's great. Let's go through. We need to know two things about this kit. We need to know approximate weight, so less than 500 milligrams, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 15, or greater than 1,500. So that's the first part we need to know, and then nurses should know that pretty soon off by the size of the kit. So, and then the next part we need to know is what was the mean airway pressure on when we were on the conventional ventilator. Now, what's mean airway? Average pressure in airway is over 1 minute or one breath, if you will. MAP, we look at that a lot. MAWP, they call it in RT school. But we're looking for that average pressure. That's going to give us an approximate setting to set this at, our mean pressure monitor. So what we do traditionally is we go, and if we have a mean airway of 15 on a child on a conventional vent, and they're failing conventional ventilation. That's really why they're going to this. We're not able to oxygenate them anymore, or they have some kind of disease process, diaphragmatic hernia, meconium aspiration syndrome, some major issues with their lungs, that we're going to put them on this put them on the oscillator. So we'll want to note that mean airway pressure before we take them off the conventional vent. You're going to note it, and you're going to add 2 to it, and you're going to try, that's going to be your target number here. So, mean airway pressure, child's weight. Why do we need the weight? We need the weight for the frequency. So what we do here is we go by what's their weight, and that's what frequency we're going to give them. So there's only 3 options for frequency. We're going to do 15 hertz, we're going to do 10 hertz, and we're going to 15 hertz, 12 hertz, and 10 hertz. Now, what's that all about? Well, what is a hertz? You know, we like to talk about breath rates and whatnot. 1 hertz equals 60 breaths per minute. Don't think of them as breaths. It's just a fluctuation. You got to think of it kind of like a sine curve. It's just going up and down and up and down and up and down very quickly, and it's going to go up and down 60 times for every hertz. So 10 hertz is going to be 600 times per minute. It's going to fluctuate. Or I like this, instead of saying a breath per minute, think of it as an oscillation per minute, because it's not like they're taking a breath 600 times a minute. No, it's nothing like that. You're oscillating air in at a frequency of 10 or of 10 hertz or 600 times a minute. So, all right, going to talk a little bit about the oscillation and the pressures. Just like I like to draw pictures because that's the way I am. So, this is pressuring over time, scalar waveforms. Remember from school, 14 centimeters of water pressure. Remember that was our goal on our oscillator. Well, what are we doing with this? Think about this. We have that pressure set, and our oscillations are just doing this. We're just going above and below it, all right, each time. So, what is this number right here, top to bottom? This is our amplitude. Think about that. Excursion of the piston, that's going to be your amplitude area right there. If I increase it, what's it going to do? Greater, higher, and below, which still is not very much pressure fluctuation. But you're going to see your amplitude increase. Amp means increased ventilation. So by turning that up, you're just going higher and lower on opposite sides of this 14, which is our goal, and that's not going to help with that. So this is going to increase ventilation, increase chest excursion, chest wiggle, whatever you'd like to call it with that. So that's exactly how that works. That's for ventilation. Now, if we have an oxygenation issue, what we can do is we're going to change this mean airway. So we're just going to take this whole baseline, very similar to your PEEP and conventional ventilation. Let's say we go to 16, which is kind of a big change. We like to do 1 centimeter water pressure at a time. We're going to take the whole baseline, move it up, and we're going to oscillate around it each time. So that's exactly what this kind of looks like if you're going to look at a waveform for it. 10, 12, and 15 are our goals for neonates. So what do you think? Do you think the bigger kid gets the lower breath rate, or the smaller kid gets the higher? Well, what it is, the smaller they are, so we're going to talk about those kids that are 500 to 1,000 grams. So very small kids, less than 1 kilogram, are going to get the 15 hertz, the higher frequency. Now, what's that going to do? When you have a higher frequency, it's not going to be as great an amplitude, so you're not going to be fluctuating as much above and below your mean airway pressure. And we'll show this a little bit later on the board here. So 500 to 1,000, you get 15. 1,000 to 2,000, you're going to get 12. So we're going down. This is a very easy thing to change. And then 2,000 to 5 kilos or 5,000, you're going to get 10. The number one key is this is not like conventional ventilation, because we are not going to wean a quote-unquote rate on this child. We're not going to change the frequency. If baby sim newbie starts off at 12, he is going to be extubated at 12. We're just going to decrease the amount of pressure we deliver with that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when I go to the board. So that's one thing we need to know. We need to know our mean airway here. Let's just throw one out. Let's say on a conventional vent we're running a 12. So our goal is going to be 14 right here. 12 plus 2, of course. Simple math, going to go up to 14. That's our goal for this. Show you how to set this thing up. So we want to start in you want to be very methodical with this each time, because what it's going to do is going to allow your circuit to be properly limited, so you're not going to cause too much damage. So number one thing we do, we take both of these knobs, green and blue, green and blue. We're going to take both of these knobs and turn them to max. What that's going to do is going to inflate the balloon to the maximum amount. This right here, you see this is our bias flow. Right now it's sitting on about 18 liters per minute or so. Don't look at the liter flow. Don't look at liter flow. Don't get obsessed with that. What you want to look at is this right here. We know our goal is 14 centimeters of water pressure. So, first thing we do, we turn this up until we are 10 above our goal. 14 plus 10, 24. We're at 23 right now. So, I'm looking at this number while I'm adjusting this. Going up, going the wrong way. Go this way. I'm slowly going up. Notice I'm not looking at my liter flow over here. Just alarming high pressure there. Okay. Let's just say you're somewhere in that ballpark area, 24.5. I'm good with that. That is the total flow through the system. We want that 10 above our goal. Perfect. So, the next thing we want to do is go to, from this one, we're going to go to blue. It says limit, pressure pop off, whatever you want to call it. We're going to decrease this. Now when I turn this down, remember what it's going to do, it's going to be changing the balloon, deflating the balloon until we start releasing pressure. I want this to be 3 above our goal. 14 plus 3 is 17. I'm looking for 17 in here as I turn this down. So, let's go down. And I'm turning it and it's not really doing much, and you're going to watch and you're going to see this slowly fall off the edge here once I hit a certain amount of pressure. There. Oh, released a bunch of pressure. Notice this is all done without the child on. So, you wouldn't want to be jacking with pressures like this with a kid on here. So, just barely nub it. Man, it is very touchy. And they're always that way. So, I'll get it somewhat close. This is the limit. What this is going to do is going to limit the amount of pressure that you can give to the kid. So think of this as like if you're looking at conventional vent, this is your peak inspiratory pressure alarm. Remember, it's not going to let you go much above that without alarming to you. This won't allow you to turn this knob anymore, and you're not going to deliver any more than 17 to this kid. So 16.8 in this case. Now this adjustment is the fine adjustment for our pressure. So we're going to control this balloon, and we want this pressure to be 14. That's our goal. So 10 above right here, 3 above our goal, and then right on our goal right here. So let's see. It's the same way. It's going to rotate pretty far, and then kind of bingo. And it's starting to drop. Somewhere close to 14. Pretty good for me. So 13.9, 13.8 is really good. So we've got that 10 above, 3 above, right on. We're looking at this pressure. The next part is our power. Now it's called multiple different things. Think of this as your volume on your radio. You turn the volume up more, or you're back in, you used to drive around and have the bass cranking in your car. Turn up the bass more, you're going to have greater oscillation of your speaker, in this case of your piston. So you give it more power, it's going to oscillate greater. When it oscillates greater, it goes farther back and forth, it's going to cause more ventilation. What we're mainly looking for is greater chest wiggle. It's going to cause greater chest wiggle. So what we like to do, this works like a micrometer for any of you people that have been through high school shop class, if you even used a micrometer. But it says 1.0. If I turn a little farther, it's 1.5. Turn a little farther, it's 2.0, and it goes all the way up, increments of a tenth each time. So we'll start at 2.0 to 2.5 every time. There's no numbers in here right now because nothing will show up until I turn it on. Our inspiratory time is 33%. That is a 1 to 2 ratio. It will never change as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I've ever seen. We won't ever change the ID ratio. It can be changed on here, but we won't ever do it. Going back down. 33. And then let's say we have a child that is 1,700 grams. So 1,700 grams is between 15 or between 1,000, between 2,000. So we're going to go with 12 hertz. Now, there's a chart that is on the top of the oscillator that you can look at. It's actually all built into this handy dandy picture right here that shows you all this stuff that I'm talking about. Because I'm a guy and I like pictures and I like to read. So, let's go to 12. Alright, at this point, we're good to go. We've got our somewhat close to our pressure. Let me bump this up just a tad bit. Get a little close to 14. There we go. And we're ready to start. Now, notice I still don't have the kit on. I'm going to start oscillation, make sure everything works appropriate. Do that by hitting the start-stop button. Alright. When you hit that button, a couple things showed up. This popped up just a little bit, not much to worry about though. Our amplitude, also called delta P, has popped up. That's going to tell you how much excursion you have with the piston. So it's going to tell you a lot about ventilation. Notice, we'll talk about this shortly, but when I change this power, it's going to change your delta P. You got to document both of them. What your power is set on, and then how much it changes your delta P. You see right here, this is our piston. You want it somewhat centered. It helps with the oscillatory process. There's a piston centering piece down here. We rotate it real far, it goes that way. Rotate it real far this way, it goes that way. Makes a different sound. We want it somewhere in the middle. And at this point, I'll be ready to put the kit on. So, here's the deal. We're ready to put the child on. We want to take the cork off. It's sealed up. But when we do that, watch, we're going to lose pressure. And then it starts beeping, and it's very annoying. And it won't let us turn it on or off. Because we have to have everything sealed. This is my test lung. Before I try to repressurize it, and then start the oscillation again. So, at this point, it's running on the test lungs. You can see a very slight, I don't know what to put it up against. Maybe that won't work. There we go. Very slight vibration of those, oscillation of that. We're going to relate that to chest wiggle, and we'll talk about chest wiggle factor here shortly. Right now we're running, and this is how it goes. So document all our stuff we need, and then we are going to monitor this patient with blood gases. So, two areas that we're always concerned with: ventilation, oxygenation. Oxygenation, we put a little sticker here that says controlled by the mean airway pressure. So think about it like PEEP. Increase somebody's PEEP, we're going to have oxygenation. If we increase this, or which increases this number here in mean airway pressure, it's going to recruit more alveoli, cause a greater mean airway, or like a kind of like a peak pressure inside the lungs, and it's going to help with oxygenation. Also, kind of the easiest way to help with oxygenation is to adjust your blender over on the side. So we have the blender and we have the mean airway. Two things for oxygenation. Ventilation, what you want to definitely look for at all times is chest wiggle. What chest wiggle is, I don't think this kit will do it, but we'll give it a try. Let's see if you can zoom in over here, man. I don't even know if it'll seal up appropriately. This baby newbie, he's never experienced the oscillator. Ooh, he does seal. We don't see any chest wiggle. Let me try to manipulate a little bit here. No, he won't. He's in late stages of RDS. Or he just has a really stiff chest. So, anyway, what you're going to be looking for with chest wiggle is you're going to be looking for wiggle between the nipples and the umbilicus. The chest will constantly move. I can put my hand on here and I can actually feel it. The chest is continuously moving. That's going to show you that you're ventilating appropriately. If that ever stops, now watch, this is something pretty interesting. This is the big key to monitoring. We've set it up, key to monitoring this oscillator. If that chest wiggle ever stops, you're not ventilating. Your baby will start decompensating almost immediately. So the first thing, and really the only thing you want your eyes on when you're ever in the room with this kid, is the chest. As soon as you walk in, look at the chest. Chest wiggle will change throughout the day. Mucus plugging the tube, other things like that. Tube becoming kinked. I can look right now, and I can feel the chest wiggle, and everything looks great. I'll go over here to the other side. We look at our numbers. The numbers don't tell you squat. Okay, this thing is this oscillator, this ventilatory device has a one-track mind. It does not get any feedback. It only delivers. All right. All it does is it just delivers your oscillations. It gets no feedback. Case in point. If I go, and this would be like a terrible thing to do, but we just went, let's just kink the tube off completely. It didn't change a single number over there. Right now the tube's completely kinked off, as you can see. No numbers are changing because, remember, this delivers only. It doesn't know the cork from a tube. So how do we know it's working appropriately? Always chest wiggle. Straighten this thing back out. If you watch that thing when I did that, no number changed. You would never know. So if you're a therapist and you're sitting here watching the numbers waiting for an alarm, your baby's going to code before it ever alarms. Because remember, it does the same thing, and the number's the same if it's hooked up or not hooked up. So chest wiggle factor is the key. Looking at ventilation. It can change, and if it does change, expect changes on your blood gas. So anything that can cause any obstruction to flow, tubes kink, mucus, bronchospasm, tube dislodged, anything like that, changes chest wiggle. You got to fix it right now. You don't have any time to mess around. You got to fix it right now. So anyway, you see with the cork on right now, we're looking at that. Always chest wiggle. This is the #1 deal. So let's say our oxygenation stinks on our blood gas. What are we going to change? We're going to change our control up. So we would increase this up, probably by 1. Let's say we're 13.5 now. Slowly bump it up, 14.5-ish. All right, change it up 1 to 2 centimeters water pressure, and then get a blood gas. Here's the big key. You make small changes, get a blood gas. Small changes, get a blood gas. The reason is because you don't want to make multiple changes at once. Changes in power can also change the amount of oxygenation. Usually we think of this as the ventilation area, but this will also change oxygenation. So make a small change in one thing and then get a blood gas. Here's the reason we set the blue where it is. If I turn this up and let's say I'm, reaching in my shift, I'm tired. I'm going to turn this thing up, and I turn it up, and I turn it up too high, crank it all the way up, look what happens. It gets blocked at 3 above our total. So that's what this limit's all about. So let's say you're going up and this kid's not getting much better and the doctor's having you increase, and they want it higher than 17. Here's what you have to do. This gets a little funky. So you pull back down a little bit to where you were. You bump this just a little bit up. I really don't know where it's at. It's just setting the limit. And now you can go up, and it should go up a little higher than 17. Yeah, it's allowing me to go a little bit higher. But those big changes in pressure are usually not really good, and they should happen over a long period of time, so you shouldn't have to do this very much. But what that does, that keeps your limit from delivering the entire, what it is now, it's 24 of centimeters water pressure into the circuit. You wouldn't want to do that to a kid. Although it's way better than hitting them with 25 to 30 of inspiratory pressure continuously like you would on a conventional vent. It's still not safe. So this is your limit for that. Now let's go into ventilation a little bit. So your oxygenation is good. We're going to mess with your ventilation a little bit. What you do is you increase your power. As I increase this, it's 2.0 right now. If I go to 2.5, watch what happens to here. There's 2.5. This went up by a little bit. That's the increase in the excursion of the piston. So we go up by 0.5 each time. We're going to get a blood gas and see how they're ventilating now. Let's do it again. Let's wait another hour. Do it again. Go up to 3. You'll hear a change in the sound, and you're going to see a greater excursion of the piston. 3.0 went up to 34. Your delta P is 34 at this time. So let's just get wild with it. Of course, being RT, we want to crank stuff up all the way. Let's just crank it up all the way. Now, we would never do this. I'm just for representation of what this does. Great delta. This is like a 6.8. Big excursion of the piston. You can see it hitting hard here. You can feel it in the circuit. That's what it's like to have a large amount of excursion. So you're just causing a greater excursion of that piston and ventilating more. We only go by 0.5 each time. So if for some reason you're setting this thing up and you got a kid that's a bigger kid and you're not getting much chest wiggle, I would recommend slowly turning this up. As long as you know everything's patent all the way through the kid, slowly turn this up until you start to see a chest wiggle. and then stop. So once you get that good chest wiggle, you know you're ventilating appropriately. Stop, and then wait a half hour to an hour, do blood gas, and then reassess it from there. Alarms are super generic. They are like from the 1960s. So you turn this little knob, you have 20 here is your mean airway right now, which looks like we cranked it up a little bit. You want to just put this usually about 3 above, 3 below. This just gives you a little bit of a warning if you're starting to lose pressure. This is the only alarm you have on your oscillator. Now, let me just give you an example. Let's say it's leaking or your tube's becoming dislodged. You see as I cause a little bit of a leak in this, it will cause it to go down, and it should start alarming. And then if you get right on the edge, it sounds like a dead bird right there. It sounds like a bird that's like dying. But you can see if I lost all my pressure. Alarm in here. Hold to repressurize, and it comes back up where it needs to be. So that's kind of like the oscillator. The oxygenation, of course, is going to be controlled with this one right here. Your ventilation is going to be controlled with this right here and chest wiggle. And then you continue to go with that. The cool thing is, as the child starts to get better, you won't change any settings, but as the lungs become less stiff, your mean airway pressure is going to drop on its own. It makes sense. Become less stiff, easier to ventilate, the mean airway pressure is going to drop. Once your mean airway is within a certain range, your physician's happy with that. What they're going to do from that point is they're going to say, well, let's put them back on conventional ventilation. We got them over the hump with all the extreme amount of inflammation, all the swelling going on. They're starting to go back down, and then so we'll look at this pressure. You'll monitor that whenever you do your ventilator rounds, your oscillator rounds, and this will slowly go down on its own. When you see that start to decrease, that's a really good sign. So we'll go from these settings, and of course this will probably be down a little bit, to straight to a conventional vent. As far as the baby's concerned, they will breathe spontaneously while they are on this. So we'll be oscillating, they'll be breathing spontaneously, that's fine. You don't want, not big advocates of paralyzing them for this. I know you think, oh gosh, that's really mean, but paralyzing newborns, you can run into a lot of issues, especially if they're paralyzed for a long period of time. You get muscle atrophy, and they're not, as strong when you need to take them off the vent to breathe. So they will breathe spontaneously with this. Just think about like a CPAP. It really just feels like a CPAP to them, breathing with a high CPAP on. So it's oscillating, it's doing some ventilation through their airways, but they're breathing spontaneously the whole time. So a couple keys when it comes to assessment. Of course, if you listen to a kid's breath sounds when they're oscillating, you're not going to hear squat because of all the oscillation. So the one thing that we'll do, and we try to limit the amount of stimulation that we give them. So we'll get together with the nursing and do an assessment really quickly, usually every 6 to 8 hours. What the RT will be in charge of is shutting off the oscillation. Now notice I'm shutting the oscillation off right here. I'm not taking the pressure away. We don't want to break the circuit and take the pressure away. It's just like an adult vent. We don't want them to lose their PEEP, and we'll have to build it back up again. So what we'll do is we'll get the nurse ready, everybody be ready, baby's breathing spontaneously. We'll say stop oscillation. I'll stop oscillation. Notice we're holding our pressure in there still. This is CPAP, the continuous positive airway pressure, going in, holding their airways open, keeping those alveoli recruited where we had them. Do your assessment, listen to them, do what you need to do, and then once they're ready to go again, you hit start, and oscillation starts. So, off and on for that, and that's how your assessment's done. One more key before I finish up here. With the circuit, the funny thing about this circuit is you've got a heated wire that comes down the center here, but you have a large area right here, which is like rain out sitting through here because you don't have a heated wire in your probes here. So you get a lot of rain out. We want to make sure that this circuit has some of a downward angle. If you have a loop in it like this, it doesn't help with the oscillation for one, but you'll get a bunch of fluid in there. We want this at somewhat a downward angle going to the child if we can. So a lot of times you'll see these kids in a giraffe that's kind of lifted up kind of high. The reason why is because you can't really get too far away from this one. There we go. You'll see the oscillator kind of far away. The kid raised up, of course you'd raise him up a little bit higher than this, and then somewhat straight going into the endotracheal tube. And I was fast enough there, I didn't cause any problems. So somewhat of a downward angle. It'd be nice if the kid was up about that high. So this water is going to drain back into here and down into this part, so it's not going to be going to the child or being stuck in the circuit at all. So you like that downward angle and the straight circuit. It helps with the oscillation process. So now I'll go over and talk just about a couple of concepts with the oscillation that are kind of the more technical part of it. But that's how you set it up. Of course, if you have any questions, you get a hold of myself or Thomas, and we can help you with that. But just a little bit of video of how to set this thing up. So we'll talk about how we are able to ventilate giving very small breaths. So the breaths that we deliver with the oscillator are approximately the size of anatomical dead space. Well, you think, what the heck, how does that even work? Anatomical dead space is the space from your lips to right here above your alveoli, your terminal bronchioles. So if we're delivering very small breaths, about that size, which are not that big, because if you give it the size of anatomical dead space, it's not going to work. But if you're a little bit greater, then it will. So that's the funky part about it. So if we're looking at our waveform over here and we have our oscillations, this right here, this top part right here, that is essentially your tidal volume. I mean, it's very, very, very small. How does it work with this? So given these small ones at a very high rate, and the minute ventilation, of course, is our awesome number that we look at, which is respiratory rate times tidal volume. Great number for looking at ventilation of a patient. So how do we keep this minute ventilation up? Well, because this is very small, we know this is going to be extremely high. So we're going to have a really high respiratory rate with a small tidal volume so we can keep our minute ventilation up. But here's how it works in the system. It works off of what's called coaxial flow. So the oscillation coming out, and this is just a depiction of the vent tube, or the tube going to the patient. So what happens is the oscillatory gases go down the center because they're going quickly. They're going down the center to the patient. All right, going down to the patient. Now, what happens? How do you exhale? Because you got this one tube going in, oscillating this in. The funny thing is with the coaxial flow is you have flow in two different directions. Your fast flow coming from your oscillator goes down to the alveoli, comes down this large alveoli, down the center, down the sides, and kind of moves its way out. And think about this in oscillation. So going through each time, small oscillations. These are small, each one, and then they go down the center, and then coming out, they actually rotate on the outside. So just to give you a representation of that, you got your gas going down the center, going to your alveoli, and on the outside you have this gas spinning on its way out. So this is exhale gas. So in other words, you got two flows inside of one circuit or inside of your endotracheal tube. The inspiratory flow is on the inside, the expiratory flow is on the outside, and then it's released by the outside the oscillator circuit. So coaxial flow going in, going down the center, and then the rotating slower flow of the exhale gas coming out this way. So how does it ventilate? You get these small breaths, and what they're doing is going around, and we know that all through this area is going to be picking up CO2. Okay, so it's going to be picking up that CO2 and slowly moving it back out. Very fast, small tidal volumes each time. So it goes down, works its way around the alveoli and out, rotates out, and is exhaled through the circuit. So a big key with this is you want to make sure that your oscillator circuit's straight. If you put a big bend in it, like I was showing with when it retains water or rain out or whatnot, you're going to jack with this a little bit because you want this to be straight as possible all the way to the baby so that you're going to have this nice flow. When you start turning it, you kind of jack with these flows a little bit, and it doesn't work quite as well. You may not see it show up in a blood gas, but this is just kind of like the theory behind how this oscillator tubing works. In case you really got inquisitive or wondering how in the heck does this work? They don't get to fully exhale. That is how these small oscillations are able to get rid of CO2 each time.